What if I told you that Ferrari could have mortgaged its entire future on a revolutionary engine that isn't even running right? Can a rule change destroy a legend like Ferrari? Stay, because what's coming is not only controversial, it's history in the making. Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now, if we continue. Ferrari enters 2026 with a perfect storm on its shoulders. The 2025 season, far from being a smooth transition to the new regulations, has been a true institutional and sporting earthquake. They finished the year without victories, off the podium in most races, and with a feeling of absolute disorientation. A team like Ferrari, with two champions at the wheel, Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, cannot afford to be fourth in the Constructors' Championship with 398 points, while McLaren, its most direct rival in 2024, doubles that figure with 833 and consolidates itself as the reference of the new order. What is most worrying in Maranello is not only the cold numbers, but the narrative that accompanies them. Because it's one thing to lose by tenths, it is quite another to lose the trust of the paddock, the public, and, most seriously, your own engineers. The team no longer seems to have direction or purpose. Everything feels improvised, reactive, without a master plan. The hope that 2025 would be a year of consolidation and then attack with everything in 2026 has evaporated. What remains is a group that seems worn out, without a winning culture, and that increasingly relies on nostalgia for the past rather than the certainties of the present. Since the beginning of the year, Ferrari projected an unstable image. Hamilton's debut generated enormous expectation, but on the track the results were gray. The seven-time world champion found himself with a car that was difficult to interpret, that did not react to the adjustments as he expected, and that forced him to adapt his driving style, something that he had not wanted to do even in his last years with Mercedes. The process was longer than expected, and although he showed flashes of his usual level, he was never able to break that invisible barrier that separates the real contenders from the chasing pack. Leclerc, for his part, has not taken that leap of maturity that many expected. He remains fast on a lap, but irregular in race management, and with a worrying tendency to get involved in incidents or tactical decisions that compromise his overall performance. The technical team didn't help either. The strategies were inconsistent, the pit stops failed again at key moments, and the absence of a clear technical figure like Enrico Cardile ended up breaking down the internal cohesion. All of this occurs in a year in which Ferrari should have already been testing and validating concepts for the 2026 car. But the pressure to save the 2025 disaster has diverted resources and energy and has left the future project on uncertain ground. The most ironic thing is that, in theory, this was the strongest driver duo that Ferrari has had in years. Two contrasting talents with hunger and capacity. And yet, the result has been an unresponsive car, an unresponsive team, and a technical foundation that is crumbling just before the biggest regulatory change in decades. The 2026 rules represent the most profound change that Formula One has experienced in more than a generation. This is not a gradual evolution like what we saw in 2014 or 2022. This time, it is a fundamental transformation. It changes the way cars are designed, the way races are managed, and above all, it completely redefines the concept of what it means to be fast. There is no room for error, no room for misinterpretation. Regulation 2026 does not reward those who understand it late. Reward those who anticipate. To those who know how to read the future before it is written, it all starts with the power unit. Starting in 2026, the engines will be hybrid in a 50-50 ratio between thermal and electrical power. The MGUH, the most complex and expensive component of the current generation, disappears. Instead, the kinetic energy recovery capacity is doubled, reaching 8.5 megajoules per revolution, a figure that multiplies the prominence of the electrical system. This means that power deployment strategies, recovery maps, and thermal efficiency will no longer be add-ons, but instead become the core of performance. But the revolution does not end there. The chassis will suffer a drastic thinning. They will be reduced by 30 kilograms, a difference that directly impacts mass distribution, structural rigidity, and the way in which the car transfers forces when cornering. As if that were not enough, aerodynamic drag will be reduced by 55%, which will require a complete reinvention of the surfaces that generate load without penalizing top speed. The 2026 car will be lighter, more efficient, and therefore more difficult to control if the balance is not perfectly adjusted. And then there is the jewel of the new regulation, the disappearance of the DRS. The system that for more than a decade allowed forced overtaking on straights will be eliminated. In its place comes an even more ambitious concept, active aerodynamics. Pilots will be able to switch between two different downforce configurations, one for cornering and one for straight, using a system that instantly reconfigures ailerons and moving surfaces. This technological leap means that it will no longer be enough to have a fast car. It will be necessary to have an intelligent car, capable of adapting in real time to the changing conditions of each sector of the circuit. All this redefines the hierarchy, because not all teams can execute this change with surgical precision. To get it right in 2026, money or history are not enough. What is needed is vision, technical cohesion, and an internal structure that understands the implications of each rule of the new regulations. And that's where Ferrari seems to be at a disadvantage. While others like Mercedes have opted for the continuity of their engine and chassis departments, or McLaren has deepened a culture of aggressive innovation, in Maranello they are still arguing about the foundations. The most dangerous thing about this revolution is that it does not give second chances. The 2026 rules will not be reversible. There will be no mid-year redesign to save the laggards. If you fail in the initial interpretation, you will be left out of the fight, and the cost of rebuilding will be monumental. Formula One is heading into a new era of winners and losers. And for teams like Ferrari, which enter with internal turbulence and still green projects, that new world can be as promising as it is relentless. Because the revolution does not wait, and much less forgive. The departure of Enrico Cardile was not just another internal movement within Ferrari. It was in fact the first major symptom that Maranello's technical structure was collapsing from within. His departure unleashed a domino effect of incalculable consequences that today, with the failure of 2025 and the uncertainty of the 2026 project, are understood much more clearly. What was once presented as a replaceable casualty is today recognized as a critical loss of leadership, vision, and stability. Cardile was not a decorative name. He was the engineer who had led the chassis design since 2016 and who was directly responsible for the competitiveness of the SF23 and SF24, two cars that, although they were not champions, allowed Ferrari to fight again at the highest level. His understanding of the ground effect, the correlation between simulator and track, and above all, his ability to maintain cohesion between the different technical departments of Maranello made him an irreplaceable figure. And yet, Ferrari let him go. The most worrying thing was not that he went to Aston Martin. It was the context in which he did it. He announced his resignation in July 2024, in the middle of the critical phase of the development of the 2025 car, and just when the first concepts of the 2026 project were to be defined. His departure not only disarmed the team on a technical level, but also generated a legal war to prevent him from contributing his knowledge to the new team. Ferrari blocked him with a court order from working until mid-2025, revealing the extent to which his presence was seen as strategic. When a team has to go to court to stop its former technical director from reinforcing a rival, it is because it is recognizing, without saying it, that it has lost something essential. But the worst came later. The SF25, which was his last project, was left orphaned. Despite being a logical evolution of SF24, it never found a clear path of development during the season. The car started well on some tracks, but was losing ground against rivals that did show constant technical progress, such as McLaren or Mercedes. And that has a very simple explanation. Cardile's absence meant that Ferrari lost the ability to correctly interpret the data, to make strategic decisions in the wind tunnel, and to connect factory work with the real needs of its drivers. The team entered a loop of ineffective adjustments, disjointed updates, and tactical decisions that never seemed to make sense. In parallel, the technical team began to fragment. Decisions began to be made by committee without a figure to centralize the vision. And when a Formula One team loses its technical narrative, it begins to improvise. Meetings stop being strategic and become spaces for reaction. We go from building a project to trying to avoid a collapse. And that was exactly what happened with Ferrari in 2025. While others write their future with firm ink, Ferrari continues crossing out with a pencil what it has not yet decided. And that ambiguity, in a sport where every thousandth counts, may be the mistake that condemns them for another generation. Because if they don't reclaim their identity now, when clarity is needed most, then the next era will not be one of their redemption, but one of their irrelevance. Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.